The National Rugby League's return to Las Vegas was, well, a mixed bag if we're being totally honest. There was certainly some good, there's also some not so good. Really, it just seems as if the second round in Sid City is going to be used as a learning experience moving forward. If last year's debut, or as they say in Australia, debut, was WrestleMania 1, a huge spectacle that turned heads and provided proof of concept, year 2 of this experiment was very much like WrestleMania 2. An ambitious attempt to do something different that somewhat missed the mark. Not all negative, and the things that didn't work can be learned from and tweaked for further incarnations. The tagline for this year's showcase was bigger and better. I'm just not entirely sure the latter held true. A quick note before we proceed with this, I'm not going to include the results of the game as part of my ups and downs. You can't script sports despite what some out there would have you believe. There will be bad games and good games. Blowouts are part of any competition, and I'm not going to hold it against the NRL or Super League or the women's game that we saw quite a few blowouts. That is sports. Not everything is going to be a 2015 grand final. Sometimes a team wins by 80 odd points. With that in mind, here are the ups and downs from NRL's second season opener in Las Vegas. The first up, it is just seeing the National Rugby League, an Australian sport, on Fox. What a surreal sight. The network that gave us The Simpsons, Melrose Place, and The Glow Puck showed rugby league on over-the-air television in the United States. It was just so cool to see. It was something that I never would have expected even 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know what the TV ratings will be, nor should anyone be overly fussed about it. The exposure is amazing, and hopefully this is something the NRL will continue to build upon in the years to come. The first down, well, let's stick with that Fox broadcast. I'm not sure why Matty Johns and Braith of Nasta were doing the color commentary for the Warriors-Raiders matchup. Neither really do much, if any, color commentating during the NRL season. They're also both hosts. It really just created a very awkward sounding broadcast. No one seemed all of that comfortable throughout the entire game. This is meant as no disrespect, by the way. What Matty Johns and Braith Anasta do is very good, and Dan Ganane is an outstanding caller with a lot of sports knowledge. But the lack of chemistry and experience between these three was on display from opening kickoff, and it made for a not so great presentation. They were less than a sum of their parts. No one seemed sure on when to talk. I don't understand why you wouldn't have McInnes in that spot, or maybe you just have one of Johns or Anasta, but not both. Also, whoever gave Matty Johns the note to use player numbers and not names really did him a huge disservice. It made him look very unprepared, but as someone who's familiar with his work, we know he does know the player names, so why he just referred to them as the numbers was really confusing. Even my wife, who doesn't really care about sports and wasn't actually watching the broadcast, picked up on this and thought it was weird that he was using numbers as he was color commentating. If she's noticing this, well, it's probably not good. Up next, Panthers vs. Sharks, all inclusive. This kind of saved the day. You know, it was not the cleanest exhibition of rugby league you will ever witness, but it highlighted a lot of what made me a fan of the NRL to begin with. Fast-paced play, huge individual efforts, a lot of skill. Isaiah Yeo and Liam Martin were absolute beasts out there. Cleary's kicking game was, well, it's what he always does. As for the Sharks, they were just very gritty, very determined to try to keep up with the Panthers, who we all know are the cream of the crop in the NRL. As for the down, well, we're going to stay with the Panthers and Sharks, but it's going to be not having this game broadcast on Fox. Look, I fully understand that the placement of Sharks and Panthers was done for Australian television, and I can respect that. Fair enough, but man, I wish this was the game shown on Fox because it was really a great showcase for the league. It's just a lot of players out there who could have, maybe brought in some new fans. As for the up, and probably my favorite up of them all, it was not having games delayed by mediocre Big East basketball. That was such a sore spot for me in 2024. Really, there was nothing quite as annoying as turning into last year's Vegas opener only for that Big East blowout to be playing out. This year, the NRL received priority. It was treated as a value property, and what's not to love about that? There was even some pregame coverage in some instances. This, for me, a huge positive. Let's stay with the ups. Super League gonna Super League. Look, Wigan-Warrington, not a particularly competitive matchup. In fact, it wasn't competitive at all, but this contest featured a lot of the things that make the Super League so special and so fun to watch. Chaotic, unpredictable, exciting. I mean, Maddie Ashton scoring an intercept try while going the last 30 or so meters without a shoe is one of the most Super League things I've ever seen. Even with a lot of empty seats, and we'll get to that in a second, the atmosphere for this game was arguably the best of all four. And Andrew Voss really did his part as play-by-play guy to make the game fun. He really enjoyed it. Obviously he's an NRL guy, but he brought an energy to the Super League contest. And I think it made everyone who watched, whether they were Australian, American, or over in the UK, just enjoy it that much more. With all of that said, more Super League teams in Las Vegas next year, please. And also, since we're at it, why not bring back the Toronto Wolfpack? Okay, that's not going to happen. Down, it's the empty seats. I just mentioned it, so let's get into it now. There were a lot of empty seats throughout all four games on this day. Last year, the attendance looked good on television. This year, not so much. When you have people coming and going throughout the day, when you have folks only showing up for 1 or 2 games, it's going to lead to empty seats. And empty seats look like crap on television. I mean, the first 20 minutes of the Raiders-Warriors matchup had so many empty seats in the lower bowl. That just should not happen. The announced attendance for this day was 45,209. Of course, the announced attendance means anyone who made their way into the stadium. Good for them. It was, in theory, an increase on the 40,746 who were at last year's Vegas opener. The issue, though, is that attendance in 2025 looked a lot less than what we saw in 2024 with 2 games at Allegiant Stadium. The announcers were constantly talking about how big rugby league is, how big the NRL is. It's this game that's growing. It's going to be huge. It's going to become this worldwide powerhouse. As an American fan who is trying to convince others to give the sport a shot, to tell them that, this is a really popular game down under and it's something that has potential. The empty seats just didn't make it seem that way. It made the Vegas opener look somewhat like one of those middle-of-the-road bowl games that happened in late December. Have yourself a week, Xavier Savage. Obviously, you've probably heard the story by now. He proposed to his girlfriend, then he goes out and scores 2 tries and is part of a Raiders victory. That is not a bad few days. He really does look like an entirely different player from 2 or even a season ago. I'm still a little bummed out Jordan Rapana isn't playing for the Raiders. He was just one of my favorites to watch. But, Xavier Savage really seems to be making that spot on the wing his own. Another up, fans being able to keep balls that find their way into the stands. This, maybe more than anything else, makes me want to go to a future Vegas opener. Okay, I'm joking a little bit. I'd want to see the games, but, being able to potentially catch and keep a ball, that's not too far behind in my reasoning. This is just a great promotion, and let's hope it continues because, let's be honest, I do really want to keep an NRL game ball. Well, let's hand it to Greece for bringing in the Ringers for their international exhibition with the USA Hawks. It was another sad blow for our attempts in the States to not be completely embarrassing in rugby league. Let's be real though, we never had a chance, not when the Greece side really tapped into the Greek diaspora in Australia. The Greek side had a lot of rugby league experience at high levels, and that much was evident from really kickoff of that matchup against the USA. Down, that has to be the NRL playing international games in a public park. So this it saw the week for the NRL get off to a fairly embarrassing start. The game between Greece and the United States was actually delayed after thieves stole some copper wiring from the lighting setup at the public park the contest was to be held at. Since this was an evening game, lights were required. This is just such an embarrassing look for all parties involved. For rugby league, you don't want to see international games being played in these rinky-dink public parks. It looks bad, and when you go back and look at the highlights of the Greece team taking on the USA Hawks, it just looks so, it doesn't lead you to believe that the sport is growing here. And from the American perspective, it's absolutely embarrassing. Now we can continue to not have nice things. It's not just copper wire and lights. Go check out any public restroom in the States these days. It's just pretty embarrassing how we just cannot have nice things. Finally, I leave you with one last up, and that is the future of NRL's Vegas season openers. I am still very much optimistic about what the coming years hold for this partnership between the National Rugby League and Las Vegas. We know they'll be back in 2026, and hopefully they keep improving and learn from what didn't work in 2025. These things take time to develop. Traditions don't form overnight. You need a runway. I said this last year when I talked about the season opener in Las Vegas, and I will say it again. There is so much to like about what is happening right now. As a league fan in the United States, being able to host NRL teams and now Super League teams and women's international teams, it really does mean a lot for me. And it's really a way that I think will get more Americans into the sport. Long may it continue. And hey, if this year was like WrestleMania 2, well, then I guess that means next year, 2026, it's going to be the NRL equivalent to WrestleMania 3. And that didn't do so bad for itself. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to know more about some of the United States struggles with rugby league, well, you can check out the video in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And for more rugby league content, will be the playlist in the lower left-hand corner. Until next time, I'm Cheyenne Hollis. This is The Touchback and Rugby League. We will see you in Las Vegas in 2026.